How are we doing, everybody? Thank you guys so much for joining with us today as we are in day 22 of 31 through the book of Hebrews. Today we enter into chapter 11, which in all reality is one of the most famous chapters in all of Hebrews, if not the most famous chapter. It's been deemed the hall of faith because the writer is going to show a bunch of faithful examples of those who live by faith. You remember yesterday as we finished out chapter 10, the writer encouraged them once again to endure, and he called them to live by faith because he used the writing of Habakkuk. It said, those who live by faith are declared righteous, and they do not shrink back. And he says there at the end of chapter 10 that we will not shrink back. We will endure, and therefore we will have faith that will save and preserve our souls. And to show them more encouragement, he's going to show them faithful men and women of God from their story, from their Old Testament, from their lineage, from their ancestors, to show how they too can live faithful, how these people were promised great things, and they had faith in those things that were promised. They had faith in the things that they could not see, and they were declared righteous. And today we're only going to cover the first 7 verses of chapter 11. We're only going to see 3 characters from the Old Testament. We're going to see Abel, we're going to see Enoch, and we're going to see Noah. And the beginning of this section, the writer is going to show us what faith is. He's going to give us a great definition of what faith is. So beginning in chapter 11, verses 1 through 7. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous. God commended him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. By faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found, because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. Without faith, it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, and that he rewards those who seek him. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. So yesterday, showing us in Habakkuk that those who live by faith are declared righteous, and if we want to please God, you must live by faith. It says that those who live by faith are declared righteous, that they do not shrink back, and therefore they please God. And the opposite of those are the ones who do not live by faith. They are not declared righteous. They do not please God, and they do shrink back. And the writer shows that these people, the one he's writing to, are not going to shrink back. He's encouraging them to stand true. And then he shows us these faithful examples. And all 3 of them, he shows that not only were they people who were faithful, they were commended for their faith, they were declared righteous, and therefore they pleased God. And he shows us that beautiful definition. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. To have faith is to believe in what you cannot physically see. To believe in what God has promised. In the Christian faith, we believe in what God's promised. We have faith in what he's promised. We have faith because of what he's already done. And we have faith in what he's already promised that he will do. And those are the things that we hope for. What do we hope for? We hope for that reward that he talked about in chapter 10. We hope for the day ahead. We hope for that eternal rest that he's going to offer us one day. We know that he's coming back. We believe that he's coming back. And that's where our faith and our hope come from. The assurance of things hoped for. The conviction of things not seen. For by it, the people of old received their commendation. The people of old, referring to the people he's going to list out here in this section, the people who did not see all the things that were hoped for. All these stories that we're going to see here today ultimately point to a greater delivery, a greater salvation, a greater covenant, a greater opportunity for faith, a greater moment in history. They all pointed forward towards Jesus. And all of them knew and believed in God. And it was accredited to them as righteous. Because of their faith, God declared all these people righteous. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of the things that are visible. Everything we see today was made out of the word of God. You go back in Genesis chapter 1, it says, and God said, let there be light. And God said, over and over again, God spoke and things were created. God spoke we do not see the things that God spoke. We see the result of what He had spoken. We were not there to see God physically and literally speaking the things into existence, but we can see the result of that act. We can see that what was produced from His word, and we know and believe that God created it because of what we can see. Remember Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hand. Or Romans chapter 1 verse 20, that all things are basically showing the attributes of God. We can see God in all things that are made, His divine attributes, His glory. We can see all of His goodness in all the things that He has spoken into existence, and we believe in that. He moves on to the first example. By faith, Abel offered God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, the which he was commended as righteous. God commended him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. If you remember the story of Cain and Abel, you can go back to Genesis and read this story. If you don't remember, sons of Adam and Eve, they offered a sacrifice to God, and Abel offered the more pleasing sacrifice. He put a lot more effort into it. He brought the first fruits. He brought the best of the sacrifice to the Lord. And Cain, on the other hand, did not. There was no effort. There was no heart. There was no reverence in that act of worship. There was no reverence in his sacrifice. And so God was pleased because of the faith that Abel had in God and the reverence that he had towards the Lord. He was pleased with the Lord, and therefore the Lord was pleased with him. He was not pleased with Cain. So Cain, being jealous, Cain being envious, killed his brother. Because though he died, he still speaks. His story, his faith still speaks. And he'll actually bring Abel back into the story here in chapter 12. He goes on to Enoch. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And there's a story of Enoch in Genesis as well, that he walked with God, that he was a righteous man, that he was a man who lived by faith, and therefore he pleased God. And so God did not allow him to experience and taste that. He just took him with him. He experienced something that no one else really has been able to experience throughout history. He did not taste death ultimately because he pleased God by the way he lived, by faith. He was accredited righteous. He was commended as righteous, and therefore God rewarded him because it pleased him. Noah. I know you all know the story of Noah. It says, and without faith, excuse me, verse 6, before we jump into Noah. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. So to go back into chapter 10 where it says, those who shrink back will not please God. He says here, without faith, it is impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So far he's shown that Abel and Enoch all sought out God, and therefore God was pleased, and they had faith in God, and God was pleased with their faith. God was pleased and commended them as righteous and rewarded them because of their faith. Now here's the story of Noah. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events of yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. So God comes to Noah and says, I want you to build an ark because I'm going to flood and destroy the world. He had faith that God was going to do exactly what he promised he would do. And you realize, if you studied throughout Genesis, it took a long time for Noah to build this ark. It took a long time. And he was believing in what God was promising. He was believing that God was going to deliver in the way he said he would. That God would bring the judgment in the way he would. He believed in the things yet unseen. And because he believed and had faith in God, and that he believed in what God had promised, his family, he and his children, were saved. And through that family, the world began new once again. That God used that story. He's used the story of Abel. He's used the story of Enoch. He's used the story of Noah to show that if you have faith in God, that faith brings righteousness, and you will therefore please God, and therefore you will ultimately receive that reward. But that reward only comes when God is pleased, and God is only pleased when we have faith that produces righteousness. Today, I want you to ask the question, do you believe? See, we all want the reward. We all want the blessings of God. We all want the inheritance. We all want all the good things that God has offered us. But do we actually have faith? Do you have faith in the things that are yet unseen? Do you have Do you have faith in the assurance of things that are hoped for? What do you hope for is the ultimate question I have for you today. Our hope as Christians is eternity with Jesus. Our hope is that he is coming back. Our hope is built in an empty tomb. That's where our assurance is, that he has secured our salvation and is being kept by him in eternity right now. And he's offering us a chance to spend eternity with him, but it comes back to us having faith. If you want that reward, if you want that eternity with him, you need to have faith, a faith that pleases God.